Welcome, I'm Jon Hansen, and I am your moderator for today's session, Mapping Success, Taking Digital Transformation from Concept to Realization. Joining me as producer on this webinar is, of course, my trusted, I don't know if I should call you sidekick, but Toby, you are certainly an essential part of the process. So Toby will be manning the polls and the slides. Welcome, Toby, by the way.
Hi, Toby.
He remains silent in the background. So anyway, he does great work. Now, let's go to the next slide if we could, Toby.
Here we come.
There we go. Now, before we get started and introduce you to our panel, that includes David Latten from Logitech, and we've been having a great conversation in the virtual green room that will carry on here. I want to remind everyone that Market Dojo ran a series of surveys. One of them, of course, is where would you start with digital transformation and procurement? There's a whole series. I would encourage you to avail yourself of the link to download these results, because they'll provide you with some additional insights that I am sure you'll find invaluable. We'll remind you at the end of the program as well. But again, it gives you an eye-opening insight into what's happening with digital transformation, why there are some of the challenges there are, why the results aren't happening as much as they are, or why they, where the successes are and what's the reason for those successes. So again, I just want to remind you of that. And then I want to go to the next slide and talk about, what's our objectives for today, because we really have two key points. Okay, well, let's start with introducing our panel. David Latten, from head of Global Indirect Procurement at Logitech. David, welcome, and if you could tell us, let's spend about 30 seconds telling us a bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, John. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, my name's David Latten. I head up indirect procurement for Logitech. As a procurement function, we've existed at Logitech for a relatively short period of time, around 4 or 5 years, which has given us great opportunities really to build it in the modern 21st century image of procurement with no legacy issues to overcome. Working with multitude of categories within Logitech. Certainly our largest spend areas are marketing, IT, and then some workplace related costs and some travel. So certainly what works for us partnering with marketing is vastly different to IT, which again is different to the other categories. So yeah, really interesting and great to be partnering with Market Dojo, and that's me.
Well, that's perfect. Welcome. And I want to be able to, as we get into the discussion, delve into the repatriation. I guess that's the safe way of putting it, of the indirect procurement function in there, and of course your background a little bit more. But glad to have you. Also joining us on our panel, queuing Toby. I don't know if there's a delay here. Oh, there we go. Adam Collins. Adam is to the left of Alan, wearing the red shirt that says Hero. Adam, if you wouldn't mind, you're a specialist helping, of course, working with Market Dojo in terms of implementation, and you are an integral part of the Logitech success from the standpoint of Market Dojo. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, John, and good afternoon, everyone else. So yeah, my name is Adam. I've been working here at Market Dojo now for about 18 months, working very heavily with the commercial team, but also that account management aspect, helping with that transition from, I guess, proving the concept and helping the users get the most value out of our wonderful system. I help with that seamless transition across into our customer success team, and also work very closely with our marketing team to spread our message.
Perfect. Welcome. And let's go to our next panelist and expert.
Who's it going to be? That's it.
Nicholas Martin. There you go. Nicholas, how are you? Welcome. You're director at Market Dojo, e-sourcing made simple, as it says on your LinkedIn profile. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, John. Hi, everyone. So yeah, Nicholas Martin. I look after the technology and the product at Market Dojo. So really focused on making the product as easy for people to use as possible. Prior to joining Market Dojo, I started my career out implementing technology projects. So actually, typically at that time, it would be very large scale IT systems. And what really drew me to Market Dojo in the first place is SaaS environment, making things easy and quick to pick up, and really allowing people to get value from the product very quickly.
Well, great to have you, Nick. And I'm going to segue, because we now know who's going to be the next person to introduce, Alan or Big. One of the things that's interesting, Nick, and going to you, Alan, is the background you have from a practitioner standpoint. In other words, you have an understanding from all sides of the table. And I mean, that's really an integral part of why you created the company, isn't it? You wanted to bring a by procurement, for procurement type of mindset and approach, didn't you, Alan?
Absolutely. And Nick's been very modest here because he's one of the co-founders as well. And he essentially we came to him and wanted him to have a look at e-auctions initially. He wrote the code overnight and showed us it the next day. And we said, well, he's probably a good person to have on board. And yeah, my background is I've got procurement, consultancy, sales, reverse auction, selling, and it all came together with the other co-founder, Nick Drew, and the three of us with the kind of procurement expertise, sales, technical background. It worked really well to create Market Dojo and bring it where it is today. And we are very fortunate to have people like David joining us and Logitech as a customer. So we're very proud to where we are today.
And that speaks a certain amount because, David, as you mentioned, you're bringing a fresh set of eyes because your background isn't initially procurement, but the perspective and understanding of where you fit in. That's really a key part of how you successfully reintroduce the indirect procurement function within Logitech, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to note that when we built the internal function, we did, of course, have some procurement going on before that at Logitech, but it was outsourced. And outsourced not very successfully. So it was definitely a case that when we did build the internal team, we were building from negative territory, really. It wasn't even ground zero, it was ground negative. Certainly building connections with our key spending partners was essential. Showing our value immediately in terms of the speed, quality, cost kind of conundrum of what you're trying to do with your suppliers. But that certainly went through to our sourcing platform too, that it had to be something that was easy and quick to use. I think the phrase RFP used to be a swear word at Logitech, whereas thankfully it isn't a swear word anymore. And I think certainly Market Dojo was a big part of that.
Well, we'll have to expand on that as we get into this. And again, Jon Hansen, let's not spend any time on this because I don't think I look any better in the picture than I do on camera. So let's move on, Toby, and focus on what the purpose is today, because it's an interesting element that we see in terms of going to success. We're going to, by the way, share poll results and have discussions outside and following the webinar through a tweet chat using the hashtag that appeared on your screen. So make note of that as well. We'll remind you later on. But today's agenda, we want to touch on survey results a bit, but we want to understand the digital landscape. You know, everyone's talking about digital transformation. I often cite, when speaking, the McKinsey survey of 1,650 companies globally, executives who responded, where there's almost a universal or unanimous acknowledgement that digital transformation is a must. As I said earlier in the green room talking with David, Kevin Piesker, president of Microsoft, told me that, you know, either in the digital age you transform or are transformed. But here's the problem, is that out of all those people who acknowledge digital's importance, only 20% have a digital strategy. Only 2% of those involve the supply chain. So where's that bridge? Where's that gap? And where are the challenges? We're going to delve into that a little bit more and understanding where we are now. And then we're going to map success. And one of the things I'm excited about having David and Logitech here, besides my own deep history with high technology and that sector, is that being able to understand how others have done it and have been successful to, and the key attributes, I believe that that's a way that we can take you to from point A of concept and digital promise to actual digital realization. And that's going to be a key point there, because according to a Deloitte survey that just came out in December 2019, the majority of organizations who have implemented digital technology for procurement are not satisfied with the results. So even those who have made the jump are still looking. And David and Logitech and his team, working with Market Dojo, will be able to give you an idea as to a clear roadmap, or at least the cornerstones and principles of a clear roadmap, so that you can make that transformation. So that's the overall scope. That's what we're going to cover today. I'd encourage you again to avail yourself of the chat room. Any questions you have, anything along those lines throughout this discussion. It is a interactive dialogue, so feel free to comment. Now let's look at assessing digitality, because I alluded to the fact, and then I'm going to go to first David and then to Ellen and the team, is the Deloitte study that came out. Again, just 2019, December, just a few months ago. And most companies, and this is a global survey of CPOs who have implemented digital technologies, are not satisfied with the results. They highlighted the areas: supply chain risk, supplier management, even in the functional elements, the traditional elements of requisitioning, speed and supply, invoice processing. There are still a majority who are not satisfied with the outcome. And David, let's go to you first. Given the technological breakthrough, we're no longer dealing with the complexity of overarching ERP implementations and all that entails. One would think that the technology would be sufficient enough to facilitate the end result that people are seeking. Yet that's not necessarily the case. One, are you surprised by these results? And number two, what do you think are at the heart of them?
I'm not particularly surprised, particularly on this one. I think in our case, it's almost, I think, what you do within your ERP and what you do outside of it. And certainly with our IT group, and I'm sure it's the same in many other companies, there's a certain kind of crown jewels of functionality that they expect and want to be in the ERP, and they're very protective of it going outside the ERP. The challenge there, of course, is that the usability and the productivity of the tool within the ERP is normally not very good. An ERP does everything near enough under the sun that a business could need, but it does almost all of that to a pretty average level. I think the SaaS, the revolution of SaaS providers and specialists within that SaaS providers has just exploded that whole myth that you have to have this one beast of a platform that does everything. But there's a huge amount of inertia, I think, and risk to potentially, or perceived risk to overcome to move away from that ERP. It's perhaps some people think along the lines of that traditional phrase that no one ever got sacked for choosing IBM. Maybe it's the same for no one ever got sacked for staying with your ERP. But the problem is it's not functioning at its best, and it kind of gets to the core really of what are we trying to do, what value are we trying to give to the business. If it's quick, easy and productive for my team to do it, the people we work with across the business see those results and see them quickly. So it really does prove the case as simply as that. But I'm absolutely not surprised, and I can see the hurdles of being that brave person to move away from the ERP, perhaps, that, like I say, some of the functions within a company will want everything within that ERP, but as that jack of all trades, it won't be the one that's best to use with sourcing and various other platforms. So it doesn't particularly surprise me now to conclude on that one.
Okay, now, Alan, before I go there, we have a question already. What was the start or the stat regarding digital transformation and companies not being happy with their change? Again, McKinsey survey of 1,650 companies found that while there was universal appeal and a recognition that digital was the way to go, only 20% of companies had a viable digital strategy, of which only 2% involved the supply chain. Now, in terms of explaining, or at least in part explaining the chasm between recognition of digital promise and actually taking steps towards achieving it, the Deloitte survey from 2019 highlighted, and there's a graphic right here, highlighted that the majority of the CPOs surveyed are not satisfied with the results. And then it broke down, as you can see, the areas of dissatisfaction. 81% expressed dissatisfaction with supply chain and compliance. 71% said supplier management was the issue, even right down to requisitioning and ordering and the things that you would almost feel are perfunctory to automate. 53% weren't happy with that. So I hope that answers your question. And this information, if I'm not mistaken, Toby, will made available, of course, on an on-demand tune in with the PowerPoint slides. Ellen, hearing what David had to say and his lack of surprise, I guess, David, would be the way to put it, and reluctance. Let's look at it from your perspective when dealing in an environment like that. For example, when you were working with David, what was it that made it easier to work with him in terms of that? You know, his willingness and recognition that we have to think beyond the familiar. And how do you work with organizations that are so intimately tied to their ERP? I mean, what's the approach a service provider has to have?
I'm going to give a general answer, and that may pass to Adam. Then, I mean, generally we find that it's not surprising, and the question is, how long procurement can continue with those kind of results and not being surprised by them. You at some point you want procurement to kind of desire and drive the higher adoption. I mean, with regards specifically working with David, I think Adam's probably the best person to highlight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key things when we first communicated between one another, David and I, was certainly understanding where the value was to be had for Logitech, and stepping into using something that wasn't existing within the organization was, I guess, my challenge to prove the concept. With the Market Dojo platform, obviously there's that great entry level sort of feel it before you decide whether or not to commit, that really sort of engaged David's attention, and certainly gave him the opportunity to understand how the system could work from an end user point of view, and show that real value at a very low risk entry point. And from there on, we've gone from strength to strength in terms of this is now being used across three regions globally, in North America, Europe, and also Asia and Asia Pac. With the Logitech users, just expanding into the areas that perhaps there would be the concern that jumping into a solution like ours comes with its risk.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just following on from that, I mean, the other part of the question around the kind of dissatisfaction with the ERP implementations, I think that is really slowly getting across, that people are kind of frustrated with spending a lot of money on ERP applications and not getting the uptake and not getting the return and not getting the benefits. And in the first webinar we did on Beyond the Bolt, I think using SaaS applications ourselves to drive a more immediate ROI is definitely a strategy that we see very popular within many organizations now that you wouldn't have had 10 years ago.
Okay, now, and I want to expand on this and go to you again, David, and then Nick, get you in this. But here's our first poll, and Toby, let's cue this. Are you actively implementing digital strategy? Either yes or no. Simple question, I guess, overall. I think you have a minute or two to respond, but when we talk about digital strategy, at what stage are you at? And let me go back here, David, because there's an interesting point. Is part of digital transformation choosing the right partners? For example, if you look at Market Dojo, they look at selecting and screening the right customers. I don't know if that's the right terminology, to manage expectations properly. From a client side of the equation, David, how important is it to have the proper expectations as to what this technology can do? I mean, can that be at the root of it? Are people seeing digital as being a magic bullet, for example? Either they understand it and are waiting to see what happens, and the ones who have made the move are looking at it in the context of the traditional framework of ERP, or they think it's going to solve all their problems. What do you think part of the problem is?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And in one way, we're in danger of sort of putting things backwards and putting the cart before the horse. I think with some of these questions about, I think the honest answer of am I actively implementing a digital strategy? The answer is of course yes, but I haven't really thought about it like that. What I am implementing is my procurement strategy, and where we're looking to spend as much of our time and resource for value and impact for the business, and that is of course sourcing across all of our business as much as we can to get the best suppliers, be that speed, quality, cost, etc. Sourcing is a process, so again, we're looking to make that process as streamlined, as simple as possible, to then be able to concentrate on the more human interactions of supply performance management, relationship management, bringing ideas and insights back into the business, etc. So I think that's our strategy really, but to actually be able to achieve that, it is, of course, in 2020 underpinned by some digital implementations. But I think what are you actually trying to achieve first, and what is your strategy as a procurement team, is what really needs to be thought about. And then digital helps you achieve that. I think it's all too easy perhaps to think, oh yeah, some of these digital platforms are really cool. That's my strategy, to have that digital platform or to do this digitally. Whereas I think that's almost thinking of it backwards. But given what we looked at and wanting to improve our sourcing and do that efficiently, and essentially have sourcing sprints versus the sort of weeks and weeks of emails and spreadsheets, that of course then shouts digitization. And to Adam's point, we did what procurement should do. We looked at a variety of different platforms, but we never actually lived the life with any of these platforms. So it was fantastic to be able to try with Market Dojo at a very low entry point, just I think on a month-by-month basis at first. We were looking for something that was very simple and easy to use for 90% of what we'd need, rather than something that might be more function-based and a bit more awkward that would struggle to get the uptake on. So I think that really sort of shouted towards Market Dojo too. So I think it's certainly has to be looked at the bigger picture, and then make sure whatever digital platforms you're looking at fit into that bigger picture. Maybe that's one of the challenges that people are thinking of this backwards nearly, but for us, the digital strategy empowered what is actually our genuine procurement strategy rather than the other way around.
Well, and I know we're going to be closing the poll in a minute. Hey, Nick, I want to go to you on this, because I think this is an important point. Listening to what David said, and then looking at the disappointment people have with digital, do you think part of the problem is that they're looking for measuring or quantifying success under the old way of, simply, oh, well, we're getting the better price from the suppliers, or we're able to do that, rather than expanding the view to understand its impact, not only in terms of streamlining the process, not only, and David, you said it, free people up to be able to focus on the relationships and involvement and impact it has. I mean, it's a lot of the disappointment because we're dealing with companies who are measuring success of digital transformation the same way that they measured it in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And a couple of things David mentioned there, which kind of resonated with me, particularly because of our approach to developing the product itself. So being very agile, doing sprints, so very short cycles, where you measure the success of the cycle, you engage with the people that are actually carrying those things out and get them to feed back into the process, what's working and what's not working. So yeah, absolutely. And I really like that approach of trying, you're implementing a strategy, but you can break that down and do it in bite-sized chunks and involve people in that process.
So now this is an interesting point. Just want to interject. It's almost seem our audience is split 50-50, which is interesting. And by the way, I'm going to pose this question to the audience. And again, use the chat room. The reason you're here, for those who do have a digital strategy in place, what do you hope to achieve from understanding what David and his team at Logitech have done? I mean, is the strategy progressing as you would hope for, or are there challenges? For those who don't have the digital strategy, maybe share with us, and again, to be anonymous, just go to the chat or post in the question section, why don't you have a strategy moving forward? Do you believe you need one or not? But I'm going to put that out to the audience. Meanwhile, Toby, let's move to the next slide. In terms of this, Nick, looking at what you said, and I'm going to go back to David after this, how incumbent is it on the service provider? And Adam, wants you to throw in on this because you've been dealing with David. How incumbent is it on the service provider to be able to say, look, when you view the success and measure the success of digital transformation, the digital strategy, you also have to take into account not only these traditional metrics, but these expanded metrics. I mean, how much education do you have to do, Nick, with the client so that they don't get disappointed? And then Adam, over to you right afterwards. I mean, what did you find with Logitech? I imagine, David, you'll expand after Adam, that he found someone who understood the expanded parameters of measurement. But Nick, start with you.
Yeah. Really interesting question. I think it depends a lot on the particular customer, and I expect Adam will reflect on that. Some people we work with are really bought into that idea of starting small and growing. Other people have more challenging, enterprise customers will have a much more challenging job on their hands to try and coordinate multiple teams. So the level of education and support we need to give them will really vary depending on the customer, what their objectives are. But for sure, we, at the end of the day, we want our customers to succeed. So a big part of that, sales process will be consultative and helping people to make sure they get the right result from our product.
Yeah, absolutely. And to follow on from that, one of the key aspects, certainly in my role, is understanding, what does the client consider as, a metric of success? Is it a number of factors? Is it simply cost and time saving, or is it about empowering people to be able to, do their job much more efficiently? There's many which ways in which, Market Dojo can help across various different aspects, depending on what angle, I suppose, the procurement lead is coming from. And it's a really interesting topic, really, to talk about in this circumstance with Logitech, because David won't mind me saying, we have a bit of an in-joke about it, but he was kind of shy to admit that he felt Logitech were quite immature or not quite mature to the stage of where they feel they should be. And I surprised David, by saying, well, actually, you're not alone. There are many other established organizations out there that don't have these kind of systems in place, you know, best of breed, off the shelf, open the box and away you go. That can give you that measurement of success. And once we, you know, discussed that, I think it became a lot simpler for us to understand what objectives and what goals would really be a measurement of success.
So now, hearing David, what both Nick and Adam had to say, and obviously working with them, I mean, is it safe to say that, again, go back to that statement, you have to look beyond the technology, it isn't just the features, functions, benefits, but as an end user and a client, you want to really understand where the value is going to be derived to properly align the selection of the technology. Because you said something interesting, you say people fall in love with the platform or the technology and think it's cool, which is great, and it may very well be, but that's not enough, is it?
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking exactly that when the others were talking, and I think the reality of our business dynamic at the time we first went live with Market Dojo and now was we're indirect procurement function. As with many other companies, that's a hugely fragmented spend bucket. In our case, it's a few hundred million of fragmented spend. Marketing is our biggest addressable spend within that. There's big value to be given in marketing, but we're a pretty small team. You're talking there's only 2 or 3 people within my group looking after the marketing globally. How on earth do they really grab that elephant and start doing some sourcing projects for that big bucket of spend across our whole global Logitech universe? And the answer is, I think without that technology that you can't. And I think it was really night and day that we went, the marketing team had a few sourcing projects coming up when we first went live with Market Dojo, and you went from it being a big heavy lift to do 1 or 2 at once to being able to run multiple RFPs at the same time. The actual time frame required for the RFP became more about how long do we need to actually assess all these suppliers, rather than just it'll take X number of weeks at a minimum just to administer the whole thing. So we really went from being very drip of just small number of projects at once to, I think, the marketing team in EMEA that were one of our first really active users had, I think, a handful live within a matter of weeks. And that throughput of events really made a big improvement to our impact on a quarter by quarter basis.
Okay, now this is, and I'm going to flip back here with what David said, let's go to, and on the screen right now, more than 40% of those who responded said that digital strategy to the PI poll is the greatest risk procurement faces in 2020. We often think economic, political instability, supplier liability, cyber attacks, but at the top, it's a major concern. So I'm going to go to you, Ellen, right now. Looking at these results, number one, are they surprising? I think you had an interesting thing to say in the green room, but even more important, with what David just described, do service providers have to take on a more consultative role than just merely providing great technology? And what I mean by that, and I referred to earlier, your background as a practitioner comes into play. Do you have to be able to look at this? I mean, is part of the risk factor is that if we lead with technology or make it the focal point, that creates the uncertainty? But if we partner with organizations who are consultants as much as they are tech service providers, that's the key to success. I mean, does that make sense, or am I off base here?
I'd completely agree. I mean, if we look at some of the things David was saying there around securing the digital strategy first, and then the kind of digital strategy fits into that, I think a lot more organizations are approaching it that way. And if you approach it that way, when you talk to technology providers like ourselves, we've got to approach it in the same fashion. So we've got to understand that the thing in like David's mind is the fact that he's got an overall procurement strategy of which technology is part of it. So we can't go in there and just say, well, here's a piece of tech which will solve all your problems. We've got to understand how that will help Logitech, for example, in this example, fit into that wider play. And so if we, even though what we supply is technology, unless we approach it from the consultative angle, but not so much consultative sales, just a level of understanding to what people are trying to achieve, then I think that makes everyone a lot more successful.
Well, now, Nick, and before we move to the next slide, I mean, if you look at the 40%, realistically speaking, the issue of concern is not that the technology won't work. And you're talking to somebody who's been in the high-tech world for 35 plus years, where, you know, not working and proprietary systems and all those things of the past, you know, it was like more of a hobbyist market that got introduced to the business world. There was a high degree of technology risk. We don't have the technology risk today. The technology works. It is what Alan's saying, the key part of the reason why 40%, they're not afraid of the technology not working, they're afraid of making it work. I mean, is that too subtle of a difference, but an important difference nonetheless?
I don't think it's too subtle. I think you're right. You know, the solutions that are on the market now, yeah, they do work, but you've got to apply them in the correct way. So, you know, you can still make a mistake in the way you apply things. And yeah, this is a big part of our process when we're working with new customers, to make sure that they can apply it in the correct way.
Yeah, and I think making it work needs to be defined. So making it work is not just implementing it so people can use it, but that people do use it, will use it, and you govern it with the correct KPIs, and not just cost saving. But I expect within David's kind of procurement strategy, he talks about data management, data mitigation, risk mitigation, and reducing costs or maximizing profits. So making it work is kind of a very broad term for quite a lot of detail that fits within it, I believe.
Okay, now I'm going to go to you, David, because this is an interesting point here, is that as much as this, so I think we're agreed that we're not worried about the technology not working, but as much as the success of an implementation is on the responsibility of the service provider, obviously, to not be a features, functions, benefit type of provider, a commoditized approach. On the other side, from a client side, having not abdicating that responsibility, not saying, okay, it's a problem, I'm going to turn it over to you and it's going to solve everything. I mean, you have to get your own house in order to be, I guess, digital ready, or what I call digital readiness. I mean, how much a part of your readiness and knowledge and being ready for digital played a role in the success?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, and I think the looking at it from a high level first, then I'll probably answer that question directly. I think we're a very small team, but we're a small team with very big ideas. I have this sort of Pareto target for myself. It's a theoretical one that I'll never really hit, but it's for my team, we spend 80% of our time talking to our suppliers, existing or prospective suppliers, making sure we're getting the best out of them. We're hearing any new ideas that are coming their way. We're bringing those back into the business. That takes a lot of time, and I've made a point of not mentioning sourcing directly, I think, within that, because sourcing is a hugely value add process, but it is a process, and we're certainly across all of our business, whether it be a value add process like sourcing or the day-to-day sort of procurement transactions of supplier setups and PRPOs, we're looking to automate all of that. You know, we're not quite at automating sourcing yet, but certainly digitizing it with Market Dojo, making it the right platform that it does enable my team to spend more time talking to our existing and prospective suppliers about where we could go with them. That's always going to take time to do that very well, but it's time that's spent very strategically. If the sourcing can give us the cost benefits and get the best supplier at the best price, but do it with a light touch, that then absolutely empowers my team to do those things that we're looking to do more of, the SRM and the category insights. And I think certainly Market Dojo played into that. Having that low barrier monthly or single project, I think, was another option. Having that low barrier eventually to try it made a big difference, and all of my team come to me, and the one thing they do say is that having that sort of, there's a person behind the tech, I think, is an essential piece, and I'd definitely say that's a USP with the Market Dojo guys as well, that it's, you're buying into more than the tech, and they're the experts on it, not me, and I don't really want to be the expert on it. That's why they're there. It's very simple to set it up, of course, but it's essential knowing that there's Adam and others in the team that are there to give us the advice about, oh, this is how client XYZ has done it, maybe you could look at that. That could have a bigger ROI than any functions in a platform, really.
Okay, now I'm going to go there, because Adam, I couldn't help but see you smiling from ear to ear with regards to that. And with what David said, what really jumped off the page for me, David, is the fact is that your experience in terms of what other clients have done, your experience in terms of the procurement process itself. Again, the one thing that I'm picking up here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, a lot of times people will say, okay, well, how did you solve the solution? And service providers will say, well, this is our features, functions, and benefits. Here's how it works. It's slick technology, etc. Again, that's a given in today's world to a certain degree, that the technology is going to be reliable. But your experience, that depth of experience that you can bring to the foreground that David just referred to, I mean, how key was that for you in assessing their readiness and being able to help direct them or contribute to where they wanted to go?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a key factor, and certainly having that understanding and almost a kind of precedent, or certainly an archive of examples of where, you know, similar scenarios have presented themselves, that we're able, you know, not just myself, but collaboratively around the room as a team, having, you know, the likes of Alan, Nick on board with that procurement background and expertise as well from a consultative point of view, certainly has helped us, or empower us, I should say, as account managers and client success managers, to be able to really hit the sweet spots of where the value add is for clients like Logitech. I mean, one of the key things is, as David touched upon, is being able to work alongside, not only providing a solution, but actively getting involved in the project that they're running. There's a couple of things that are ongoing at the moment that very often we you know, get together every other week or so, or just fling across ideas via email or over the phone. And I think it's a really good fluid relationship. It really does help add the value to not only a solution or a piece of tech out of the box, if you will, but as David mentioned, having someone behind that, you know, not just myself, I can't sadly take all the credit, but the wonderful team, you know, all the way through from the tech and the leadership here to our client success rollout and marketing as well.
Okay, so let's now, okay, so what we did with this first part, the first half of our segment here, our webinar, was to really give a general overview of some of the key, and you know, I hate to refer them as intangibles or soft points, but they're really the critical elements of success and the key takeaways to sum this up. And then I want to get into the nuts and bolts, not of the technology, but of the results first approach that Logitech had, because that's the model to emulate. But is it safe to say that in today's world, two ways to bridge the gap and achieve satisfaction are, number one, from the client's standpoint, is to be digital ready by having a clear understanding as to what you want to achieve beyond the traditional metrics of measuring procurement success, leveraging technology to become more strategic and build the relationships with both internal and external stakeholders to ensure that you're aligned with their objectives, not only from the start, but on an ongoing basis. And then from the service provider, Market Dojo side of the equation, even though you are the provider of technology, to have a depth of procurement knowledge and experience and a growing client base to be able to pool that information together so that you can identify the right clients to work with and how to contribute to helping them to understand how they can leverage your technology to succeed. In other words, set their expectations properly. I mean, am I missing anything here?
Sorry, John, are you coming to me on that one first?
Well, actually, I'll start with you, Dave, and then I'll go to Alan and Adam and Nick.
Cool.
It was actually out there for the universe overall. It was a free-for-all.
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much covered a lot of things there, and what was coming into my mind when you were saying all that was really the reality of our situation would be like I was saying, we're a small team with big ideas. I think in a pre-digital era, we'd have to come a big team with big ideas to actually satisfy some of those thoughts of ours, whereas digitization does empower us to actually succeed with those big ideas, roughly speaking, or even maybe entirely within the remit of my current headcount. I think that's the real power of digitization, and goes back to my point, and I don't want to keep on emphasizing this, but it goes back to the point of digitization can empower what your strategy is. It doesn't necessarily have to be the strategy itself. And what I might have had to triple my headcount to do, I can now do with my existing team via the right digital partners.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, really good points there, because you know, when we develop Market Dojo, we work with organizations from 2 million in turnover to many billions, from teams who are one-man bands to have like 200 people in the procurement organization with a huge variety of skills. And we've never been a player who's kind of been a niche, like we're only going to work with FTSE companies, for example. Our technology, we really wanted it to work with the procurement of any size, of any team, of any skill set. And then that technology has to help fulfill their procurement strategy, which is is equally varied and might also go from A to B. So I think we're very lucky, I think, especially with Anna mentioned with the team, that we all work towards that, making whoever is successful to whichever aim, and the technology has to be able to back up those particular KPIs that you attribute to procurement, whatever they may be, whether it is just we need to save 5%, or whether it is you're looking at stakeholders or risk or data or compliance, and it has to be able to do that. And I think that's where we find a lot of success, and being able to slot into David's strategy is just a wonderful thing to be able to do.
All right, so we have the foundation for the relationship and the partners. Let's go specifically to Logitech, the results first approach. And Toby, as we advance to the next slide, David, tell us, what do you mean by a results first approach?
So I suppose really looking back to when I first took over this role, like I say, it was a new function to bring in-house. And I think if I did a poll, I didn't, perhaps I should have done, but if I did a poll of the company when I first took over, what does procurement do? Who are they? What do they exist for? I think anyone that did know us, and there'd be people that probably wouldn't have known us, I think anyone that did know us would say that, oh yeah, they're the guys that approve my PRs and convert them to POs. They're the people that set up my suppliers. And that's true. We are guardians of that process, and that remains to be the same today. But it's certainly not what I get out of bed for in the morning, and it's certainly not the value that procurement can deliver. And so I think when we were strategizing about, well, why are we bringing this internally? What are we looking to do? And none of this is rocket science, probably in the world of procurement, but it is. I think we had this idea of a value cycle, really, and at the moment we're not quite there entirely. It's aspirational to a certain extent, but the results in terms of, yes, we can be a center of excellence for sourcing, get the best suppliers at the best pricing for what we need in the different categories. But we can also then manage those suppliers to make sure that they're following through with their paper-based savings to give us what they said they'd do, and meanwhile building all of our expertise and intelligence within the group. That this whole idea that's been around for a long time, of obviously about the category management, I think it's all too easy to get lost in the terminology. I suppose to my mind, what you're really talking about is someone that knows that industry, sources in that industry, knows what we want within that category, be it marketing or IT or whatever in Logitech, but also knows what's out there in the market. And to do that, you have to really talk to the suppliers, again, linking to that 80% Pareto idea of ours, and then bringing those ideas back. So it was really, if I went to leadership with the whole idea of, we're bringing this function internally, it's a risk mitigation function. We're looking at making sure our supplier setup process is clean, PR process is clean. These are all things we're actually doing now, but I think if I went to the leadership with that as being my initial aim, that they'd all immediately be thinking, why are we bothering to bring this in-house? Whereas, of course, we went there with, we're going to build a strategic sourcing center of excellence. We're going to have these aggressive savings targets. We will save you OPEX. We will bring that intelligence into the business. So it was really picking those as the results to go for first. And we are absolutely looking at some of our process points now, but I think we've got some credit in the bank to do that. And it's accepted as, yes, we do need to sort out the plumbing of some of these processes now. But it's probably the old idea of get some quick wins in there, get the right wins going, get some positive sentiment about procurement, which there wasn't when it was outsourced, for sure. So it was very much, it was the right thing to do, but it was also kind of a survival tactic, probably, of where can we get the first wins and really prove that idea that, yes, we do need this internal. So that was some of the thinking behind it too, for sure.
Okay, yeah. Now when we. Sorry, just to trigger, sorry to interrupt 1 second, Alan. Let's trigger this next poll, by the way, as we talk about this and carry on this discussion. What is the main reason for holding back on a digital strategy? For those who do not have one in place, for those who do, and half of you do, is it progressing the way you want? If it isn't, what's slowing down the progression? Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No, but my apology. I was actually really curious about David's answer then. A question for you, David, on that. I mean, do you feel that to move forward with that digital strategy, you had to focus on a promotion of cost saving first before looking at the compliance and the risk mitigation and the process efficiencies, or did you find actually you wrapped it all up together? How did you first approach that with the powers that be?
Yeah, I think this answer is going to vary, of course, from business to business, and as much as anything, it probably depends on what your leadership want from their procurement. What do they think procurement is? And very much, we were coming from a position of the general consensus at leadership, but like I say, across the business, it would have been, oh, they're the transactional guys that do stuff for us a few years ago. But
Yeah.
at a senior enough level, when you ask them, it was cost savings. We will judge you on cost savings. Do whatever's right for the business and whatever you feel is right, but we will judge you on cost savings. And there's a certain trap in that, really, and it's something I'm aware of now that we've been doing these savings for a few years, that there's a certain trap that you might chase those savings, which will keep on getting you those victories in the short term, but you need to develop for the medium and long term. But very much in the initial, and that's where we are now, really. Hence, we're moving into supplier liaison, SRM, SPM, and building our own knowledge base and new ideas, etc. But certainly, the perception of what a procurement team should do for Logitech when we brought it in-house from our leadership was, you are a savings engine. Our OPEX at the time was definitely, there was heavy pressure on optimizing it. So that was very much something that was key in the company, and they saw procurement as a tool to do that. And that's really what we were in our first few years of development, and still are now to a certain extent, is very much that sort of tool that people go to optimize their OPEX. But that was undeniably what they wanted from our team. So I think certainly as an initial target, we had to deliver what they wanted, really, and then develop from there. But that was the sentiment we had in the business at the time.
Well, now wait. One thing I want to add here, and this is over historical experience. You know, and I also want to get into why they outsourced it and why Logitech repatriated back, because that's a great discussion separate and apart from this. But historically speaking, the less efficient an organization has been, at least from my research, the greater the savings in the first and second year may be going. But over time, as you begin to make those improvements in the process, the savings begin to shrink from the traditional standpoint of what they're looking for, because there's the improved efficiencies that are happening. I mean, that's really what you're talking about. If you look at this, you've got, what you're saying, David, is you've got to appeal to saving money out of the gate, simplified, but recognize that that is only going to last so long, and that you have to find other areas of value to demonstrate why you're doing this. I mean,
yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. And actually, funnily enough, I was talking at all hands this morning, and I raised exactly that point. And I think you see it all the time, don't you, of a new indirect procurement function in a business. When they first start, there are opportunities everywhere. There's mismanaged contracts, there's sourcing that needs to be done, there's opportunities everywhere, but you're developing your maturity. So you might kind of have 6 or 7% saving in year one. You might develop that to a higher percentage next year. Year 3, you might go higher again. And then, unless you change the paradigm, you might all of a sudden see that percentage drops, and then there'll be some very awkward questions to answer with your leadership if that happens. But it's entirely understandable that it happens, because you've really attacked all of those easy opportunities, and you've got them under control. And then all of a sudden one of your renewals comes around again, and you look at it and you think, actually, yeah, I negotiated this one a couple of years ago. This one's actually really tight. There may not be that many opportunities there. So I think that's the in terms of going up the maturity curve, that's the necessity, really, to then look at these different avenues for value. And that's what we're doing now. And it's something that I have thought about, and we've thought about how do you track a really successful SPM, SRM, challenging suppliers for new ideas? How do you track bringing insights back into the business? And on some level, you're not going out with the intention of necessarily getting savings from doing that, but if these new ideas are good ideas, you could argue that they'll bring effectiveness, they'll bring efficiencies. They should, soft or otherwise, they should probably bring some sort of saving. So it might be that the saving is still the single most important metric, but just sort of how you go about getting them will be different. But certainly in terms of pure sourcing, I think that's something that weighs on my mind a little bit, that we're getting to that point now that we've always had more savings year on year. We may not be able to do that so much easily in future. But even there are new avenues of different ways of sourcing. Like we've recently done some auctions that are only just finished, so I can't share too much on them. But we've only just recently done some live auctions with Market Dojo that have opened up enormous avenues for savings that we didn't have before. So I suppose there's just different ways of getting those savings, be it different ways of sourcing or maybe good SRM, good category management. Maybe that should end up in savings eventually. But absolutely, it's I don't want to be that guy that has to then start answering awkward questions about, David, why are your savings lower this year than they were the last couple of years? Because if you don't change the paradigm, that could happen.
So now, and Adam, and of course Ellen and Nick, feel free to chime in, because is this part of the advantage of the Market Dojo approach? You know, the results first. In other words, as David indicated, the management may have had a traditional view of the value it can bring to the table. So you have a low cost of entry, and you generate some of these quick wins, which then progressively buys you credibility and time to be able to focus on developing these other points of value measurement. I mean, is that really one of the key factors of going in, is again, buy the drink, expertise as to how to get those results first, work with somebody like David, like Logitech, to get those immediate wins within the framework of familiarity, and then work to expand that scope of savings? I mean, is that part of the secret to success here?
Well, certainly in this case, it's proved to be the outcome, I suppose. I mean, it's a huge advantage to us to be able to prove the value, very quickly. One of the things that David had mentioned earlier, actually, which was a point I didn't touch upon, but another value add was not just necessarily measuring what those savings look like and being able to show that to your leadership, but also just being able to do things efficiently by means of running 2 projects or 3 projects even concurrently. I mean, even that in itself can be considered a measurement of success when you're delivering a result, turn around in a 4-week period rather than a 6-month period. It's all these kind of things that, our platform really does enable us to be able to back up, the statements we make and prove the concept. And, moving forwards, I really look forward to some more exciting sourcing opportunities with David. One of the points that he makes there about, having to answer why perhaps the next year's savings aren't the same as the first or as high as the first. Well, so long as savings are being achieved, then we're on the right track. But we'll continue to work very strategically with Logitech to be able to enhance that.
Now, we're running about we got 7 to 10 minutes left, so I want to bring this home because I think it's an important point. Let's tie in the strategy or the poll results. 50% said the reason that they're not moving forward is resistance to change. 25% a lack of resources and uncertainty regarding the likelihood of a successful outcome. The lack of resources and uncertainty, I mean, I think a lot of that can be delved into a little bit further. But the resistance to change is one that is interesting to me. David, when you look to deal with a provider and ultimately selected Market Dojo, I mean, what change had to take place within your organization? I imagine a low cost of entry, start small and build big, would eliminate any change fear. I mean, can you give us some perspective on this from the user side?
Yeah, I think there's certainly valid points. I think I'm also very lucky that we're a long established and quite well known multinational, but we're actually not a huge multinational, certainly not in headcount. So in terms of getting buy-in for this, certainly myself and my team knew that there was an obvious case that we need some e-sourcing solution here. The emails, PDFs, and Excel sheets going everywhere is not a solution we can use in the future, particularly not with a small team. Outside of that, I mean, we're a very lean team. It was really just making sure that myself and my own direct manager, who's our global head of operations at Logitech, it was really just him and I being aligned that we should do this. In terms of is this a go or not? So it was that simple. So I think being a lean company made a huge difference there. And then in terms of actually the opportunities out there, then of course, yeah, we were as a new opportunity for us that we'd never done before, we were conscious of OPEX, so we were looking for very cost-effective solutions out there. But it was really that simple because we're a very lean company and looking for quick wins. And yeah, like I said, I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but the fact that a one-off payment for a simple month's use we were using Market Dojo for a sort of live, but let's call it a pilot RFP to see how it went. But it was a live project. We were using them at very low cost pretty quickly, which went well. And then I suppose from the Market Dojo side of things, we're all of a sudden thinking then, well, do we need anything else? We've used Market Dojo very cost effectively. We know we need one. It's kind of playing towards what we want from a platform, which is that quick, really user-friendly, good support behind the scenes. So yeah, very simple for me at Logitech, partly because of our lean structure, just myself and my own boss really having buy-in on it. And then the low cost of entry and simplicity to use was a huge feather in the cap of Market Dojo when we did start looking.
So that ultimately answers all three of the risk elements cited in there. Change management, not a whole lot of change management because you're ready in mindset and understood where you would use the technology. The uncertainty of implementation, again, with today's technology, it's not that challenging as long as you know where to implement it or what to expect with it. And the resources. I mean, how much resources did it actually take to do this? Was it one of those overarching, we've got to do 10 JAD sessions, or because that's real issues that we have to address here.
Yeah, no, none of that really. I think my team, certainly the ones that used it straight out of the gate, had a few sessions with Adam and Elle and others in the Market Dojo team, and then kind of got going with it. There was certainly some optimization to make it easier on an ongoing basis in terms of having templates in there in the platform. When some of my team have been on leave, I even managed to go in there cold and managed to use it. So that was pretty much with no prepping. So I think that was a nice sign of success too, that I could go in there. So yeah, very, very simple, light process. And I think, again, going into this, what is our strategy? And Market Dojo are partners we've picked from the tech side of things to work with that. It's very much a growing strategy. We'll definitely use the platform more for sourcing next year than we have this year, and again for the next year after that. We're certainly looking at tech partners to then look at the SRM and SPM, contract management, even sort of supplier intake forms and all this sort of things. I think it goes beyond sourcing really, and certainly Market Dojo being procurement people at heart, or at least quite a few of the people there, they kind of get that about what you're looking to do.
And that goes back to what we're saying here on the slide, because if I look at you, and I've known Market Dojo for a long time, Mel, and I believe we first met, connected in 2013, and I've seen a lot of technologies. The differentiator here is that there's the same, and I call it the entrepreneurial zeal, or the passion for the procurement process, is that it wasn't just you coming in saying, here's technology, it's pretty cool. It's understanding and relating what David wanted to achieve and taking that measure first. David talked about results first. Is it safe to say your side of the equation is understanding the environment first and then leveraging the technology? I mean, is that a reasonable statement?
Yeah, you know what, I was just thinking as we were all talking there about the kind of the shared goals and the shared challenges, because at Market Dojo we realized we could provide tools to help you negotiate very quickly, but procurement's more than that. Hence our development and our vision for the roadmap and like a procurement CRM. And it's quite interesting that our challenge and goal to develop that interest outside of just savings, listening to David earlier, is very much procurement's goal as well, to convince the organization that they're more about savings the whole time, but about risk management and risk mitigation and compliance and SPM. And it's quite, we all seem to share the same goals, that we're trying to help procurement as a whole and move away from just about being price. So I think this is why we work so well, that we've got these shared vision.
So is it's safe to say seamless implementation and the efficiencies and all achieved are as much a part of the relationship and aligning with the right partners as it is the leveraging of technology, David?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's probably a bit of an insult to even call it an implementation. I think really it was one day we didn't have the platform, the next day we did, and then we were doing events pretty quickly with some really nice support from Adam and others at the team. So absolutely, I mean, this is about as far away as you can get from these sort of laborious 2 or 3 month implementation experiences. It was scarce. I'm sure there was some work for the guys in Market Dojo, but for me and my team, it was the platform wasn't there one day and it was there the next. Really, as about as simple as it got.
Okay, I understand. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Still?
we can hear you, John.
Okay, for some reason my camera's maybe that's highlighting and featuring my good side. I don't know. Anyway, I'll try to figure it out. We're near the end here. You know what? I guess I want to be able to conclude this. And Toby, move on to the next slide if you could. Is it safe to say that, you know, we saw the three obstacles. We saw at the very beginning of the webinar to bring everything home, is that there's a recognition that digital transformation is important, but the majority of people are in a holding pattern. Of those who have made the move, they're not happy with it. So in looking at all those factors coming into play, is it safe to say that the first thing you lead with is choosing the right organizations to partner, and an understanding and a depth of understanding that isn't just driven by the technology blindly, but driven by the understanding of the procurement process in the industry? I mean, is that really a key? Choose the right partner, and then you'll get the right technology. I'll go to you first, Dave, and then I'll go with you, Alan, and the team.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I've probably said a lot of this already, but yeah, it has to be a partner that fits in with where we're trying to go to. Has to be a platform that works with our team. We're a very lean team. It couldn't be something that would require sort of its own admin headcount in its own right, or be some sort of laborious implementation. It has to be agile. From the position I was coming at, it had to be looking at the wider procurement picture that Alan was espousing about. So yeah, absolutely. I think the industry is getting to this point now. I think that when you are looking at SaaS partners, the software platform was only part of it, really. I think, and a huge differentiator can be how good is the partner fit behind that, and what sort of support do you get from that. There has to be absolute alignment there for sure.
All right, and Alan, let's turn to you. We're running a couple minutes over time. Thank you for the majority of you who have stayed with us. What would you add to what David just said? And again, you're a technology company. You're providing a solution, but it sounds like you're heavily emphasis on the consulting and understanding the process, and then putting in the technology. I mean, fair statement?
I think I'd probably say you want to start with what are your objectives before choosing your partners. But certainly once you've got some form of understanding of what you're trying to achieve with your transformation, then choosing the right partners is absolutely the correct thing to do. And having, you know, as partners, as technology partners, we want to work with our customers, and understanding what their objectives are help us to ensure that we're able to provide the correct solution.
And I think what the key parts to gain there is you're not even really approaching it in a consultative way. You're just employing the right team who share the same values as an organization, like people like Adam. And I think that then drives the right approach of basically just trying to help identify and then helping a customer kind of solve their challenges and overcome the issues.
All right. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody. Remind everyone that there is a handout besides the on-demand version. There is a series of surveys that Market Dojo did that I've had a chance to look over and find very, very interesting. But the reality is whatever the obstacle, whether it's resources, whether it's change management, whether it is a fear of making it work, the fact remains is if you choose the right partners with whom to work, and understand how to leverage technology, but lead with the right partners, you're going to be successful like Logitech. I mean, can we close it on that?
Why not?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
All right, everyone, thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone that we'll be posting and carrying on the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag that was provided. And David, thank you for sharing it, because I think it's very important that the end client who's had success actually speaks. And of course, the Market Dojo, I appreciate the fact that when we're talking about this, you move from the commoditization of technology as former practitioners to the actual principles of how do you create a sound process, understand the process, create and work to create a sound process, and then automate that process. So I appreciate on that standpoint. And of course, to you, Toby, my producer, thank you as always, efficient and punctual, and we just wish everyone a good day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.